Folks, happy Friday and welcome to the Freedom from the Press podcast. My name is Jason Robertson. Today, we're going to be talking about Joe Biden's border disaster. And I'd like to say I'm here with my partner in crime, but he's actually on location.
Todd Peterson live in Phoenix, Arizona, and we are going to go really deep into the immigration crisis here. I'm looking around and I see it right next to me. So, Jason, let's get into this. We have some numbers that are just going to blow your mind when we talk about just the sheer number of people crossing the border and what that cost means to you fiscally, but also culturally, too. We have a lot to get into today.
Oh, my gosh. And Todd, does this mean we've hit the big time when you actually go on location in Phoenix, Arizona?
I think this qualifies, although I think next time we're going to have to visit the border ourselves. We might have to get some Facebook Live down there.
Oh, my God. I think that would be absolutely spectacular.
But Jason, I'm dressed warmer than you. I'm in Arizona. I got my hoodie on.
Well, for us in Minnesota, I was telling Todd before the show, like I was out doing yard work. I mean, it's 35 degrees, so you got to get the rest of those leaves cleaned up, right? All right. Well, hey, as we dig into this, folks, as we always start, we're going to try to give you facts. We're going to try to educate you. We're going to try to break the mainstream media narrative to tell you what's going on with the border and legislation. If you've been following our podcast, we've covered everything from ethanol subsidies to Alexander Vindman over in Ukraine. We've talked about Social Security. Our goal here is to take a nonpartisan approach. We would encourage you, a lot of conservatives follow our page. We would encourage you to like and share the show. That's how we beat the algorithm. And share this information with people that you might not politically agree with, because they need to understand what's going on too. So when you look at a border and you look at immigration, let's start with a basic premise, and let me know in the chat, without borders, you don't have a country. Todd, would you agree with that premise?
100% true, because that's what's going to define us, because within that border, that's where we get to set the rules for what society looks like. That's going to be the language we speak, the norms that we follow, the communities that we build. Without that, what separates us from, let's say, Canada or Mexico? Because we have our distinct political differences, cultural differences. Without that, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you look at other countries, I don't know if you know this, Todd, but there's some stuff going on around the world where we're defending other countries' borders.
I've heard about some of those borders.
Shocking, isn't it? We can spend $100 billion defending others' borders, and yet we won't defend our own borders. Now, if you look at our agenda for today, we're going to talk about the number of people that are crossing the border, why they're coming in, what their financial incentive and the cost on us fiscally, also the cultural implications that it's going to have in the border. And then at the end, we might have to break out the tinfoil hat when we talk about voting citizenship in the end game, because that's a little bit of extrapolation on our part. But Todd, how would you describe, how is immigration supposed to work in a country like the United States?
I mean, let's say any country here. So let's say that we're down in the United States here. I've got the border with Mexico. When I'm in the United States, I need to make sure I know who's in here. Because, right, Jason, we hand out Social Security cards once you're born. We keep track of our citizens. Those citizens pay taxes. Those citizens go get jobs. This is how a society functions. Suddenly, you have the border system where, and when we get into numbers, millions of people suddenly, I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. I don't know what you do. And I don't know the impact and the trickle down of what all that means to you here. So really simply, and I don't think our audience needs us to tell this any more explicitly, without that border functioning, our country ceases to function at a certain point, because suddenly it's not about citizens anymore. Now it's just a free-for-all of everybody in here.
And I guess, to start some of this conversation too, I would love to say that I am pro-immigrant. I
Absolutely.
think that people that are living in other countries that say, I look at America, see of what they're doing in laws, what they're doing in society, the free market system, and they look at that and say, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of freedom. And they apply for entry into our country. They come over, they join our society. And if you think back, some of the best Americans are immigrants. And they are people that saw our way of life and said, I want to be part of that. And I might even do a separate religion, or back in the day, there might be, Little Italy in New York. Those Italians came to America because they wanted to join our way of life. Those Italians, if you ask them, even though they had their own little cultural centers, they identified as Americans. They loved to be here. They were proud to be here, and they wanted to be here. And that's an extreme difference from what we're looking at today. People that are coming across the border illegally, one, they don't appreciate our laws, because if they did, they would come here legally. Now, in their defense, some cases, Joe Biden sends signals like, oh, yeah, come on over here. We got free stuff waiting. Second of all, though, they want to import their culture and their way of governance on us. They're coming, a lot of them, from societies that are struggling. Most of them are economic migrants, if we're honest. They're in countries that are just in poor economic conditions, and they want to come here, and they're not looking to be part of the melting pot. They're not looking to say, hey, how can we adopt this American way of life? They're looking to see, like, how can we fundamentally change the country? They have their own ulterior motives. And that's what we need to wake people up on, because the left frames it where they make it sound like, oh, you're a racist if you don't want immigration. And there's an entirely different feel for somebody who wants to come in legally and illegally. And the people that come here legally who want to adopt our way of life, like, those people are great Americans. In a lot of cases, like I say, sometimes they're better than our existing citizens that don't appreciate all the freedoms and glories that they have in America. So, Todd, what are your thoughts on
Yeah, just on that last point, Jason, that was a perfect segue to my own thought here. When we get these charges of racism and xenophobia, the left wants to frame this up as a racial conversation. You and I could care less. I think when you're a conservative, you put values over anything else. I would gladly ship out all of the white leftist lunatics in this country, and I would welcome anyone of any racial and ethnic background if they shared conservative values and they valued freedom and the American principles that you and I fight for and talk about every day on the show. Let's make that a racial conversation. White leftists, you're out of here, because I don't share anything, and I have nothing in common with you at this point. But everyone, if they want to come over, and unfortunately, Jason, like you mentioned, a lot of the immigrants now do not align with the values that we're trying to promote here. But hypothetically, if they did, I would let them in a heartbeat, and we'll do a 1-to-1 trade. Let an immigrant come in, we'll send a white leftist out. I think that'd be a great trade.
Take a blue-haired liberal that has an I Hate America sign and get rid of them, and bring in the dude from Guatemala who's like decked out in the red, white, and blue, and like,
we'll figure everything else out later.
That.
I'll teach you English, but you and I have a lot in common already, my man, because you love freedom.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Todd, let's start with these numbers just so we can frame up this argument.
All right, Jason. So we have shared this. If you've been following on the podcast before, this has been popped up as well. Just so you can frame this contextually, understand that the number of illegal aliens since Joe Biden took office has now exceeded the population of dozens of states in this country here. All right, so we have seen over 8 million illegals, and this is a combination of encounters at the border, the gotaways at the border. So every single encounter or non-encounter, this is us keeping tabs on people. And again, when you have these known gotaways, you're kind of playing the guessing game as well, because we actually don't know everybody that we're missing out on. That's the whole point of a gotaway, right? So you could have someone come in undetected, but they're going to kind of estimate and get to these figures here. But you look at some of the states on here, Jason, you and I are in Minnesota usually. I'm down in Arizona right now, but even Arizona is under that number. So 7.5 million citizens in Arizona, over 8 million illegals have come in through the border here just since Joe Biden took office.
It's funny, as we were doing show prep, and shout out to Todd for doing a great job pulling all the numbers and slides. Todd is also our producer as well as a co-host on the show. So everybody give a shout out, applause to Todd. These numbers are just shocking, because if you think about it, since Joe Biden took office, we have imported the 13th largest state in America with people that came here illegally, not going through any process. As you'll learn, they get to stay here. We don't know any idea who they are, where they're from, any of those pieces. And it's just truly terrifying. And then you think, like, we've just added a 51st state worth of people that are, luckily now we're putting them in a lot of blue areas. So that's kind of interesting.
And suddenly they don't want them anymore. So that's also interesting.
Yeah. Kevin hits the nail on the head too. How many terrorists have we infiltrated our our country. Stay tuned. We're going to go through some numbers about how many people on terror watch lists and some of that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and I will say, Jason, just here we are live on location. So I used to live here. Full disclosure to our audience, I know a lot of people down here. Haven't kept in touch with a lot, but I reconnected this week, and it is amazing how unprompted. So they know what I do, they know what we talk about here, but I didn't start this conversation. On their own, they just said, you know what? We wonder who is coming across the border because we see so many of them down in the Phoenix area. And they made the same remark. How many of these people are just waiting for that phone call or their beeper to go off? And again, that's kind of tinfoil territory, but it's a real possibility beyond just some of the comments, what you and I have said, Jason. Like, this is what a lot of Americans are thinking and feeling now, too. Because we don't know who they are, we don't know what they might do.
Yeah, and it's funny. I got to give a shout out to Tina here in the chat box. Nailed it. No other country in the world would allow illegals to come in and get everything free. We demand to put an end to this illegally gathered up and send them back, border closed. You bring up a great point too, Tina. It's not just securing the border, which we'll talk about later, how securing the border means different things to different people. To Democrats, it means check them in faster through not keep them out. But we have to have a conversation about these 8 million people that are here. Should they stay? And that's going to be a difficult conversation for a lot of people. For me, it's pretty simple. If you came here and didn't follow the rules, we'll be glad to pay for your airfare back to your homeland and wish you well.
Yeah, those are some tax dollars I don't mind investing in that process. I will say that. Wholly opposed to taxes, but if it gets you on a plane ride, that's the only fair way to go about this. And Jason, these are just the numbers from Joe Biden. This doesn't keep track of everyone else here illegally prior to Joe Biden's administration too. So we have to keep that in mind. Like 8 million is a lot, but we're adding 8 million on to even more that we're already here.
Insane.
And Jason, so we talked about what do we do with folks? Do we send them out of here? Just so everyone understands the reality. I was surprised by this. I think our audience will be as well. Just know that of all the millions of people that have entered this border illegally here, less than 6,000 were placed in removal proceedings. And so you're talking about 99.7% of illegal immigrants crossing the border. 0.3% are actually having something done about it. The 99.7% that cross the border are now here.
It's funny. Some of these numbers just got to blow you away. So you're telling me of these hundreds of thousands of people that came in, like 5,993 are the only ones that they looked at their application and said, oh yeah, like you're out. But it's important to understand too how this process works. So when they're coming up from Mexico, and the first question is, how are they getting money to come from Mexico? Because they're coming from countries that are economically challenged. Also understand these people are not Mexican. They're being flown into Mexico from all over the world, and then they're dropping them in and they're walking up. The cartels love it, like, because they end up getting paid. They check in at the border. They're given a cell phone and a court date that's up to 3 years out, and they start receiving public assistance at that day. And now at this point, at the border checkpoint, they'll say, okay, well, your court date's 2 years from now, or 3 years, or whatever the number is. Where do you want to go? Oh, you want to go to New York? Oh, you want to go to Chicago? Oh, you want to go here? So they'll hop in a bus. They'll show you up there, and great. It's welcome to America. You can start collecting from our services day one. But Todd's going to tell us about. So Todd does a lot of research on this stuff. Are we going to the lost migrant slide next?
Let me do that, but because it's related to what you just said too, and then we will get into the lost migrant situation. This is kind of unreal. Now that I'm down here, I was starting to read some local reports too, kind of your point about sending people across the country. So Phoenix Sky Harbor, one of the busiest airports in the country here, they say that they get hundreds of immigrants every day just dropped off. Okay, so some of that's from Border Patrol, some of that's from friends and family, some of that's just getting bused from somewhere, some of that's just walking and showing up. Hundreds of illegals every day show up to the airport here in Phoenix, and they just expect a plane ride from somewhere. And so the city of Phoenix has actually had to set up services to help these people buy a plane ticket, make a phone call. And so, Jason, as you and I get into the cost of what this means, here's another added cost. The city of Phoenix now has to have staff dedicated just to illegal immigrants so they can welcome them and support them and accommodate them just at the airport. And the Democrat governor that got elected last year against Kari Lake, she's actually set up a program where she says, I don't want to bus people everywhere. I want to fly them around the country because it's easiest on them. I should share that article in the comments here, but when she was interviewed about this, she said, I just want to get these immigrants to their destination, make it easier. If we know we're going to send them to DC, why are we taking a bus across the country? Let's just do a 3-hour plane ride, set up the process so it's a lot smoother for everybody. So just know down in Arizona, their governor is now going to give everyone a plane ticket. That's her goal, at least, because she just wants to get them out of here faster. Doesn't mind having an open border at the South, but doesn't want to keep them either. So there's your leftist hypocrisy in action once again.
Well, yeah, and it just it blows me away too, because so my wife, like, she's been getting on me to get a Costco membership because she likes shopping there. I don't like it's just two of us. We don't buy that much quantity. But if I walked into Costco and didn't have my Costco card, wasn't supposed to be there, Costco escorts me out. But if it's the border and you show up, they escort you in, they give you money, they give you a phone, and then they're like, where can we fly you? And I got to say, Todd, you're an American citizen. If you went up to the city of or the state of Arizona and go, you know where? I'd like to really fly to Hawaii, or can you fly me to New York? They would look at you like you were stone cold drunk. They'd be like, are you insane? But if you're an illegal migrant, they're like, sure, New York, no problem. Here,
Yeah, no hablo inglés. They're going to buy me a plane ticket wherever I want to go. Like, what a great deal this is.
Yeah, maybe that's a trick. Maybe we gotta speak broken English. See,
I should work on my tan a little bit too. How's that sound?
Yeah, I guess we're kind of pasty white boys.
Yeah. All right, Jason, Jimmy makes a great comment here, and then we'll get into the rescue efforts because I found that so laughable. But cut off their funds and they'll go back from where they came from. I mean, honestly, when we talk about solutions to this, Jason, this is where we get into tinfoil hat territory. I am kind of at the point now where I don't think this is an accident anymore. We need our tinfoil hat moment.
Da, da, da.
I don't, it's hard to say that this is accidental anymore and not intentional because, like Jimmy says here, just take away the cell phone, take away the hotel money, take away the plane ticket, take away the bus ride, take away the per diem, close the border, just build a wall. Like, our audience here in probably about 5 or 10 minutes could lay out all the prescriptions necessary to make this problem go away. Jason, you and I in this hour-long show, I think we could probably solve the problem as well, but it's not going to change in the next hour here. Jimmy's solution, it's not going to happen in the next day. And it makes you wonder, as evil and as cruel as our leaders are, I don't think they're always that stupid. Even Joe Biden, in his state of senility, must recognize that a border wall works, that free money incentivizes people to cross the border, and we're just not seeing any changes. So I don't have a tinfoil hat, but I think there you go. I think it's on purpose.
It is on purpose, and I gotta say, it's kind of laughable, some of the unintended consequences too, because all these cities, when you hear the word sanctuary city, and we don't necessarily go into this a lot with the slides, but what it means is they're not going to work with the federal government to remove these people. In addition, they have social service programs in many of these large cities that say, like in New York, they have a right to housing. So what right to housing means is if you show up and you got no house, they put you up in a house for a couple years at taxpayer expense. So when you hear these stories from New York, how they're spending billions of dollars and illegals are taking over hotels, that's because when you send 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 people to New York, and New York has an existing law that says if you're an illegal, we pay for your house. Like, for anybody in New York that's watching our show, like, drop us a comment. How the heck did you guys land on we want taxpayer money to go to pay for somebody who's in the country illegally to stay in a hotel? I don't understand. Like, that has gone beyond like social safety net, and that's reaching insane territories.
And don't forget, New York allowed them to vote as well in local elections. So the city of New York says, here's a hotel, here's the ballot, just take, here are the keys to the city, basically, at this point.
Yeah, and these folks that are here free, living off your dime in New York, do you think they're going to vote for more benefits for more folks that are here illegally? Or do you think they might say, well, no, I don't want that. I mean, it's these cities are going to destroy themselves.
All right, I promise we'll get to this rescue effort here in just a moment, but Michael makes a great comment. American citizens are going to have to close their own border. And I don't know if you remember, Jason, there was a story of a rancher here. His name was George Allen Kelly. There was an immigrant that crossed his ranch in the Nogales area, so U.S.-Mexico border, and shot this individual. And so, as we've seen now in New York, where you have like Daniel Penny, and you have all these subway heroes that are they rescue people and then they get held for murder charges or manslaughter charges. The same thing happened down in Arizona last year, where a white rancher and they racialized it, of course. He happened to be a white man, shot a Mexican national there, and they held him then for murder, despite some of the defense arguments coming out that he was protecting himself. And again, the very powerful argument that protecting your private property, there's no difference between property and life, because without your private property, you really have no access to your own life in that case. But again, that's happening down in Arizona here as we report live on location, but so much ridiculous stuff happening every single day. And yeah, we are going to turn into vigilantes at some point. And as the law is now showing us run by the communists, that law is going to then be targeted towards you for having taken the law into your own hands.
Yeah, I got to say, shout out to the chat. Really active chat today. And I want to point something out that Butch talks about too. For every 700,000 people, the state gets one more congressperson. I know that happens. I'm not sure it's 700,000, just full disclosure. But to understand, because the left makes the argument that, well, these guys can't vote, which they're working on getting them to vote. So in California, in the last census, they counted illegal immigrants in the population. That determines how many members of the House of Representatives California gets. So even though an illegal migrant doesn't necessarily get to cast a ballot, they picked up 2 to 3 members of the House of Representatives because they had that population. And when Trump said he wanted the citizenship question on the ballot, they said he was racist. No, he wasn't racist. He was saying the representatives in the House of Representatives should be based on American citizens, not illegal. So great call out, Butch. All right, we got to get to this program, Todd. Todd told me about this, and I'm like, okay. There's no way this is true.
And I had no idea either. We were doing some show prep here, just trying to figure out. This is from CBP's own website here, so Customs Border Patrol. So they implemented a program in 2017, Jason, where they call it the Missing Migrant Program. So when you talk about costs to the U.S. taxpayer here, this one might take the cake almost, because you now have illegal immigrants knowingly crossing the border. And again, dangerous situation. You're crossing the hot desert. You might be going with some individuals that are unsavory, to say the least here. And we've kind of talked about that before, what kind of that price you pay as a would-be migrant here to some of the cartel. But what happens is the Border Patrol knows that you're an illegal immigrant. They then find out that you're missing, and then they dedicate man hours and man resources, manpower, to go find you either in the desert, or if you're a minor, they might go look for you in certain homes. They had over 30,000 of these rescues take place. And just understand, I wish we had pulled up the average salary of a Border Patrol agent, and I wish we would have had some numbers here from the agency about how long each of these searches take. But Jason, to understand 30,000 just in the Missing Migrant Program,
Right.
This is someone's entire career.
I was going to say, like, Todd was telling me about this, and I had heard a little bit about it. And understand, for anybody that wants to fact check us, this is CBP's website.
This is their own government website.
This is the government website. This is not some conspiracy theory. And he's telling me this. I'm like, we have areas of our country that are lawless, that police don't go, that, we talked about debt on previous podcasts, and we're dedicating government agencies and assets to go find people who are coming in illegally that got their ass lost in the desert. Like, I'm not saying I'm a heartless guy and like, hey, we want bad things to happen to these people. But for God's sakes, folks, when we got to go track down 37,000 lost migrants in the desert, something is.
And Jason, it goes back to the other financial incentives. If I know I'm going to get a stipend every month, a hotel, a cell phone, if I know I'm going to get rescued, this is almost a consequence-free trip at this point, because I know I just got to start walking to the border. And if I don't make it, they're going to come pick me up and give me a nice little helicopter ride the rest of the way anyways.
Yeah, think of that. Like, you're coming in and whatever, like, you get a helicopter ride, you get a cell phone, you get money, and then they throw you on a plane. Like, I'm thinking we might be doing this wrong, Todd. We might need to fly to Mexico and walk back across. Like, all
right, coming to you live from Mexico next week as we come across the border and start getting our paycheck every month from the U.S. government.
All right, Todd, where are we?
All right, let's throw some more numbers up. these numbers, again, it just blows your mind. I think it's worth taking the time to just go through some of these different stat points. In September of 2023, and again, this comes from Border Patrol's own website there, 218,000 encounters between ports of entry along the southwest border. All right, Jason, again, this is 1 month. This is just between ports of entry along one segment of the border, 218,000 people. And again, this is the encounters. This is not the getaways. This is just what we encountered in 1 month. And again, you think about the manpower with that. How many agents are down at that border encountering 218,000 people? And who's processing all of this? And who's recording all of this? I mean, it blows your mind, the logistics down here. Instead of just putting up a wall, we have all of this going on.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And okay, shout out to Butch for those who want to fact check because he grabbed the link confirming the number. So,
Thank you,
Butch,
Butch.
thank you so much for tuning in. We love when people can fact check us in real time. It's kind of the fun of doing podcasts when you have an engaged audience and an educated audience because they might drop things that we don't even know. So that's spectacular. And Cindy's on fire. All right, so let me grab Cindy's. I'm from upstate New York, and this crap pisses me off. It's got way out of hand. Build the damn wall.
Yep.
Well said, Cindy.
Cindy, you're about as far away from that southern border as possible, and you are still living with that every day up in New York. You can't escape the illegal immigration piece at this point. Not only do they bust them around, but again, once you're in the country, you can move freely around. It's not like we have checkpoints from state to state. Once you get across that border, you get to go anywhere. New York, unfortunately, far left, very blue. They got all sorts of goodies they're going to hand out to folks.
Well, and I gotta say too, the like I have some friends in New York, and it seems like New York's like Minnesota. So in Minnesota, we've got the Twin Cities, that's all the crazy people, and then like we live north of the Twin Cities where people are pretty normal. And there's Republicans and Democrats, but they're like your normal Democrats that are like, I'm not a communist, but I'd like to have a little bit of a welfare system. And they see these people coming across the border and they're like, this is just batshit crazy. Like, why are we doing this? And New York's got to be the same. Where I talk to people in upstate New York, and one of my friends, Mike, who also does a podcast, he's up there and he's like, I can't even wrap my head around it. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. So, hey, we got a fellow Minnesotan. Shout out Cheryl
Welcome
Johnson.
aboard.
We love Minnesota. I wish it wasn't run by
Yeah,
communists.
Jason, I mean, I know we didn't really get into the midterms or the elections that took place this week. We're a year up from the presidential election, some big stuff, but there were a lot of big elections, a lot of ballot initiatives this week. I can't understand because immigration is tied directly to Democrat policies. Democrats picked up a lot of big wins this week across the country. And to look out, if you were to listen to this show, hear just a few of these numbers there, you would say we need to do something about it. But the party that is promoting this more than anything scored huge this last Tuesday. And for the life of me, I just can't understand. If you don't like politics and you don't want to vote Republican, that's one thing. But to go actively mark the box for Democrats, knowing everything that they do, I have a lot of questions.
Well, and I'm going to break that down, and then we'll go to our break.
Yeah, let's do it.
But here's the problem, folks, and here's why Todd and I do what we do. And like I say, if you like what we do us a favor, like, comment, share. Share is an important thing. We do a podcast every Friday where we try to inform and educate. And the way the word gets out is by you sharing. Because when we're on social media platforms, we're on YouTube. I don't know if you guys know this, but they don't necessarily like you talking about border stuff. So if you don't share the content, it's not going to get out to people. If you do want to support the show, because this is kind of our job, go to www.theamericantribune.news. That's our Substack. That's where we do some of our deep dives. We post our podcasts there. You can sign up for a free membership. You can also sign up for paid. So if you're like, I like what these guys do, I'll give them $8 a month. We would certainly appreciate that. And once again, that's at www.theamericantribune.news. We also have a .com site, which is our free site where we post fun news articles. Interesting point, though, on Facebook, I used to drop the link in the comments. Facebook, because they didn't like the content, they actually flag our page if I drop www.theamericantribune.news. And I know why, because this week we actually did an interview with some members of the Boers Party down in South Africa. South Africa is tragic. And we actually did an interview with what was going on down there. And that stuff that should be covered on the news isn't covered on the news. Go read that article and that interview that Will did. It's going to blow your mind. But hey, we're going to get ready for a break. We got a couple sponsors. My Pillow, one of my favorite companies and products ever. Go to www.mypillow.com/Tribune and you can get huge savings, and Split Rock Coffee. For those who like good coffee, which I don't know about Todd, I'm an all-day coffee drinker. Split Rock Coffee is a coffee you can drink all day. And if you go to their website, you can get big savings. Use it. And Todd, what's the promo code for Split Rock Coffee?
You see it on your screen right there. Todd, that's me. Do Todd 10 to get 10% off on some delicious coffee. Cheers to that, and we'll be back after the break.
My Towels solved a problem that we've all had with towels. You go into the stores and they feel lotiony and soft, but then you get them home and they wind dry you. That's why I made My Towels. They actually work, they're soft, and they absorb. And now I'm excited to announce 2 brand new lines of My Towels. What makes them the best towels ever is they're now made with 100% long staple Shapir cotton. This is a combed ring spun cotton that makes My Towels even softer and more absorbent than ever. And now you get a 6-piece set for an amazing introductory sale price as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get My Towels for only $29.98. Or you can get my designer premium line for just $20 more. Either way, you save 50% now on all My Towels. They actually work. What a concept. This offer won't last long, so please order now.
mypillow.com.
Hey, happy day, everybody. Thank you for your generous support this year for Split Rock Coffee. I just want to come to you real quick and talk to you about a couple of things. One of it is our Coffee with Purpose program. You know, that part of those profits go back to supporting our disabled veterans, our children, our families, organizations, Fishing for Life, Air Power, those types of things. Not only do you get a great cup of coffee, but I got to tell you, folks, it's a great mission that we're on. And we have light, medium, and dark, and it's in whole bean or ground. Now, here's a couple of samples of our ground product. This is a light and a dark, and there's a medium also. If you go to our website, splitrockcoffee.com, and all of our products are there, and take a few minutes, look around, leave us your comments, please. And today we've got a special. As you check out, you can use your promo code at splitrockcoffee.com, Todd10, TODD10, folks. Todd10 today, 10% off, and get on it right away because we're selling fast for fourth quarter. Christmas and the holidays is coming up, folks. Thank you again. SplitRockCoffee.com. Use your promo code Todd10. Thank you so much.
Giddy up.
All
I
right,
gotta
we're
say
back.
too, if you haven't tried the My Pillow towels, you're doing yourselves a disservice. Best product they have, in my opinion. Hey, before we get back into it, I do have to address Eddie's comments, and I do want to make a point that might be unpopular with some viewers. Eddie says the Democrats aren't winning. That's what they want us to believe. One, fact check true. Todd's in Arizona. Kerry Lake should be the governor. Just my humble opinion. Not making any claims for all the social media companies that might want to tag that comment. I'm just saying I think Kerry Lake was good. An important concept that you need to understand, though, and why I say it might be unpopular, Republicans, especially establishment Republicans, are just as at fault for this problem as Democrats. And that's a hard pill for us to swallow as conservatives, because if you go back 2016 to 2018, we had control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell could have passed legislation that would have required secure borders, fund the wall, deport illegals. And the Republicans had obstructed it. So on this show, we are against establishment Republicans many times, because while they like to campaign on, oh, the border's walled bad, and here's your campaign donation email, they don't actually necessarily want to close that border. They just want to fundraise off it. So it's important that we don't just make this a Democrat problem, but we say, like Republicans, when they had control, they didn't institute laws that would have stopped this either. Donald Trump did what he could through executive action and some enforcement things, the Stay in Mexico policy, but he had to do that without the support of the House and Senate rather than with the support. So as we look at 2024, it is important, and right now primaries are starting to happen. And I got to say, if you have a member of your House or if your senator is up for election and they are not going to support securing the border and removing people here illegally, you need to primary them. Because even if President Trump wins the presidency in 2024, which I'm hoping for, you need to make sure that we give him the people in the House and in the Senate that are going to enact the change that we as Americans want. I hope that makes sense. And if I hurt anybody's Republican feelings, I apologize.
Well, sometimes the truth hurts. And Jason, like you said, once they get out to DC, sometimes there's not a big difference between Republican and Democrat. That's why we do what we do under the banner freedom from the press, because we're breaking out of that binary that we're told that we have to buy into. And look, Jason, come general election time, if there's a Republican on a ballot against a Democrat, you better believe I'm going to vote for the Republican, because we cannot let the Democrats win. But the most important process there is the primary that leads up to it, because we have to be very selective about who we as conservatives put on the ballot and run as a Republican. And I would argue at this point, if you've got the same person in there for 10, 12 years and they haven't done anything, get them out of there. Try someone different, because the status quo is certainly not working there.
Yeah. And you know, comment section's popping hot, folks. And Donna Frost hits right the nail on the head with what we're going to be talking about in our next thing. Illegals should not get anything for free. Take care of your veterans first. Todd, I think that's the perfect segue into our next topic.
All right, so we went through a lot of numbers in the first half of the show here. We talked about just how many illegals are crossing the border here. We talked about some of the figures around how often that happens, some of the measures taken for that. But now let's specifically zone in on education and healthcare. I think some of these numbers are going to blow our audience's mind here. And so when we talk about educating kids, there was a Supreme Court case, Jason, just for a brief history here, in the 1980s that ultimately decided that if there is a minor in America, they are entitled to a free, I'll say free because nothing is free in America, that's you and I paying for it, free education in the K-12 system there. And so that includes now illegal immigration. And back in the 80s when this law was passed, not really a big thing. Like percentage-wise, you got a handful of kids in a couple areas. But as you and I know, we can look around. There are children of illegal immigrants, minors, often unaccompanied still as well, throughout the country now. And if you take some math here, as this one article did, so they say nationwide, per pupil spending is about $15,000. That's upwards of like $24,000 in New York. I think Utah's down at like $8,000. So they did the national average on this one and just figured out that just to educate in general, all of the illegal minors, it's almost $8 billion. So $7.6 billion for us to house in our K-12 public schools all the children, either undocumented, illegal, unaccompanied, what have you there, kids that have crossed the border, they now become students in our school system, billions of dollars just to have them come every day to get their meals. That includes the salary. And then, Jason, I'm going to hop over here as we're kind of on a roll. Specifically, one of the biggest issues with this part, or one of the biggest costs, is limited English proficiency. And so in different places, you may call them an English language learner, emergent language learner. There's different terms for that in the public school system, depending on where you are. But it's estimated now that 10% of students in America, again, in that K-12 system, 10% of them are learning English as a second language. So wrap your head around that next time you walk into a school building and just picture, if you're in a community that doesn't have this yet, but picture 10% of that population requiring English language instruction in addition to the regular instruction. So remember, this is now extra staff that they're hiring, licensed teachers, paraprofessionals, support systems in place just to provide language instruction to them. And again, this is all free of charge if you are that illegal family. All right, Jason, back to you on that one.
I gotta say that, like, some of this stuff, like the common sense meter on anybody listening, whether you voted for Trump or you voted for Biden, like your common sense detector should be like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. So if you think of a legal migrant, a legal immigrant, legal, not illegal, they see our country, they want to come in. And you talk to these folks, what are the first things they start doing when they're in their country? They say, We need to start learning the language. We need to start learning the culture. We need to start figuring out how we're going to assimilate to American society. Because I'm coming in as an American. Hopefully, someday I take my citizenship test and become an American citizen. So I need to understand what it means to be an American, how to speak the language, how to do those things. I don't show up at America's shores with no prep work, no research, no time spent doing anything, sticking my hand out and say, well, it's now your job as an education system to teach my children Spanish. What are, or teach my children English. What is their responsibility for somebody coming in to learn our culture? And that's that promise of what we talked about at the beginning of the show. Legal migrants are great people. Like, they study, like, oh my gosh, we want to move to America in the next 2 years. We better start learning English. And they show up. At least you can have kind of a broken conversation a lot of times or whatnot, because they want to be part of it. They are not coming here to say, why don't we speak Spanish or Italian or whatever instead? They're saying, like, no, I'm going to America. America speaks English. Like, that's not racist. That's not bad. Like, that's the language of the country. I want to go live there. I better learn English. But if you say something as provocative as, maybe these people, instead of speaking Spanish, should speak English, like, they call you a racist. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever heard of, Todd.
Well, and Jason, just so we're clear on education, I used to work in Denver for a little bit in a school. It was a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. They actually had their what they called a dual language school. So a lot of the children of these illegal aliens just got instruction in Spanish. They said, why even? They got some English instruction too. Obviously, it's an American school, but they just said, you know what, math is really important. We better teach math and Spanish to make sure they get it. So not even trying at that point.
Well, and when we talk about what makes a country, and borders make a country, like social norms, culture, those sorts of things all make a country. Your language makes a country. And I got to tell you, if I'm going to go move to Germany, you're damn right I'm going to learn how to speak German before I show up and expect to be part of that society. If I'm going to move to, excuse me, to Dubai, I'm going to learn how to speak the Arabic dialect. That because I have a responsibility if I'm going to your country and saying, like, I want to be part of your country and your culture. I have a responsibility of somebody showing up at yours. And us asking for that as American citizens does not make you a bad person. Saying, our language is English. You should probably speak it. That's what we do around here. That doesn't make you a bad person at all.
Yeah, and Jason, I wonder, here's a thought experiment maybe for the Thanksgiving dinner table. But if you have someone that voted for Joe Biden, let's say, or leans left or supports open borders, and they've done some traveling, if they say they went to Germany, would they expect Germany to cater to every single one of their needs and accommodate them to the same extent here? So, yeah, I want to go live in Germany. All right, relative that voted for Joe Biden, do you think Germany should give you German instruction to your kids? Do you think they should give you a check every month since you're newly arrived to the country there? And that might obviously, in practice, I'm guessing Germany does offer that to maybe their Middle Eastern refugees and relocated persons. I don't know if they would do that to Susie from upstate New York necessarily. But I would guess that as an American, most people would say, if I go somewhere else, I need to fit into their customs. So for them to square that, to say, I know I would do that if I went overseas, but then to turn around and say, I don't expect the same people to do that when they come here. Just again, there's always a disconnect, it seems like.
Well, and it's part of that erosion, and that's one of the concepts we talk about. Part of that erosion being proud to be an American. Like, I am proud to be an American. I think this is the greatest country in the history of the world. They're not teaching our kids that. That's no longer a popular thing to say. And we need to be proud of things. Our Constitution, greatest founding document in the history of governance. And you can't be afraid to say those uncomfortable truths to people. And the fact that they want to denigrate us and say, no, you're a bad person for wanting them to learn your native tongue. It's no, like, we're proud of our language. I mean, sometimes we use it colorfully, but sometimes it gets manipulated. But we're proud of our culture. We're proud of our country. We're proud of our Constitution. And if you want to be a part of this, you should want to learn those things and be a part of them too.
And Jason,
and
I
funny
like what
comment
you
of the
have
day,
here.
which I don't think I can share on here. Gary on YouTube, I'm shocked the public school said math was important. I thought they only taught beep, 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 and pronouns. So,
Well, that's true too. Carrie, that story was probably 14 years ago. So things have changed. And when I say math, I probably meant that pretty liberally there. So they use Spanish instruction for all types of educating
Yeah.
there. But Jason, to your point, I like what we have in America. I don't want to lose it. And if you're an immigrant coming here, you're coming here for a specific reason. You are leaving your home country, your friends, your family, your culture, your heritage, what have you, and you're starting over in America. There's a reason you're leaving that other country. I don't want you to bring in that other country here because it wasn't working out for you. If it was working, you would have stayed there. I don't want your values and your mindset that led you to either a socialist country or a poverty-ridden country. I want you to come to America, if you're coming here, to embrace what America has to offer, not to bring what you are leaving behind.
absolutely. Todd, where do we travel to next?
Well, we haven't gone into all of the costs yet. We're not going to do a whole lot with healthcare with the time remaining here, but this was an important slide to show up as well. Again, we just want to give as many numbers and hard facts as possible to our audience here. So you can leave this program and take away some pretty, I call mind-numbing, staggering. There's a lot of different adjectives used to describe this because it really does open your eyes to just how bad the situation is here. This is a chart, if you're watching us live on Facebook here, in Florida. This was the cost of major health and education programs used by specifically illegal immigrants in 2019 here. And so I'm just going to read off the chart here a little bit. Births to illegal immigrant mothers. The number of births on Medicaid was 490. And now the births that were uninsured was over 9,000. So you look at all of the illegal mothers now giving birth in Florida. Welcome. You now have an American citizen in the hospital, by the way. We can talk about the 14th Amendment a little bit later. But most of these mothers that are illegal have no health insurance. So, Jason, who ends up paying for that if they're not insured?
Pick me.
Pick Here, me. I'll help too.
Yeah. Everybody in the chat, pick you too.
So, again, we're looking at, and that's the cost in millions there. Children on Medicaid with no disability, 129,000 kids. And then with the disability, 5,000. We're hundreds of thousands of illegal minors at this point then entering the hospital system in just the state of Florida, mind you. And we're racking up billions of dollars in costs that, again, float back to you and me, or residents of Florida specifically in this case here. And then just the number of public school children that are illegal, 189,000 minors, illegal minors just in the state of Florida. And again, the per person cost is roughly $8,500. You do the math. We're now in the $1.6 billion range just to educate, again, in Florida, children of illegals.
And shout out to Todd, because this is where it gets kind of interesting. So Todd and I spend way too much time reading stats on government websites or watching C-SPAN or actually getting facts from governmental agencies. But one thing I've noticed, and I think Todd can weigh in on this too, you'll find these illegal immigrant costs are becoming more and more difficult to find on government websites, where you used to be, if you notice some of these, we reference stats from 2-3 years ago, and you're like, God, why did they do 2019? Why didn't they do 2022? That's because 2022 is not published. That's because the government doesn't want you to fully understand all the costs and all the subsequent costs of how much this is costing the American taxpayer. And I got to say, if you're from Florida, this is a few years old, you're probably over two. And this is, it's 1,625 million, which is $1.6 billion. Folks in Florida, go look out on your street. You got potholes in your street. You've got government buildings. You don't have enough police, and you're paying $1.6 billion to educate people that are in this country illegally. I have no words.
No words for that whatsoever, Jason. We do have a couple of videos that we could get to, but just to kind of bookend that conversation. So when we talk about the uninsured visiting the hospital system, Jason, when I'm driving around in Phoenix, these roads are a hot mess. So much more so than when I used to live here just 8 years ago. How many of those are now illegals driving on the road? A lot of them don't have insurance. Guess whose insurance premiums go up when you're driving now on these roads because accidents aren't going away. Okay, so now my car insurance premiums just went up because I've got to subsidize Miguel and Hector driving around down here. When I get my health insurance, I have to pay a little bit more on my health insurance premiums because goodness knows I'm looking at these stats in Florida, 9,000 uninsured births occurred just in 2019 to illegal mothers there. The hospital's not going to eat that. So I am now paying more for my health insurance, my car insurance, right? I'm paying more in taxes because the children of all these families, they're going to get their free breakfast, lunch at the school system. So again, just remember, none of this is free. It always comes back, Jason, to you and I, the American taxpayer. We end up paying for this. Is that fair? I would rather have lower car insurance because I don't get in accidents, knock on wood. I feed my own kids. They don't need to get fed in the school system. So it always comes back. Do you want the government to take care of everybody? And again, some of the earlier comments came in here. If we take away the financial incentive, this goes away. But as of right now, Jason, this train is not slowing down. We just keep pumping money into the system and throwing money at people.
And I got to be honest, if I'm somebody sitting in Guatemala or whatever foreign nation, Venezuela, I've got rough economic conditions, and I see Joe Biden on TV saying, "Yeah, come here. Well, give me your tired poor week. We'll put you up in a hotel and give you food and give you all that." Like, I'm packing up and I'm heading, and you can't blame them because our administration is inviting them in. Well, hey, let's go to a video before we close out talking about kind of
Let's
what
do it. So I think this is going to be Senator John Kennedy. He's a gem, but he's going to get another number for us that I think is going to also blow your mind a little bit. So let's take a watch.
Percentage of the illegal immigrants who came across the southern border were not from Mexico. Do you know?
Senator, I know that third country nationals has been on the increase, the number of encounters.
What percentage?
I can certainly.
You don't know, do you?
I can certainly.
It's 71%. Since President.
All right, we'll put a pin on that for a moment there. But Jason, 71%, and now we have a term for it. Apparently, third country nationals. So again, not connected to Mexico. In other words, these are people that are crossing into Mexico before crossing into our own country. But when we think of illegal immigration, and maybe especially down in the Arizona area, we always think of Mexican immigrants, right? I think that's just the common, like they're crossing their own border with us. They're coming into the country. But 71% of all illegal immigrants today are not Mexican nationals. They are coming from countries all over the world. And if we frame it the other way, only 29% of illegals crossing the border are actually Mexican, are actually coming from a shared border. Everyone else, they're train ride, plane ride, boat ride, they're hiking. They're coming from all over the place just to get here now. Okay, I'm taking this away here. The other thing that was interesting, and this is Mayorkas again. Notice that he didn't have an answer for that, Jason.
Right.
He's getting asked a very direct question. How many of these folks coming across the border are from not Mexico, from somewhere else? And he says, I don't know. How is it that the senator on the committee has that answer right in front of him, and then the secretary for the Department of Homeland Security that would know that better than anyone can just go up there and say, I don't know? To me, that seems like perjury, because you know damn well what that number is, Mayorkas, and you're just evading that.
It's funny you say that, and Todd sharing a video clip from our, we share these on social media, our Facebook page, Freedom from the Press and Freedom Street. We share these clips that we get from these congressional hearings. We try to upload some of them to our Rumble channel, the America Tribune. But it's funny because the number of times you see a federal agent up there, somebody who's in charge of something, who is asked a basic question that they should know, or they should have been prepared for, or that kind of thing, they always respond with, I got no answer. And if we had a legitimate press, the legitimate press would be saying, impeach Mayorkas now. If you show up at a congressional hearing and you can't tell me the demographics of the people we encounter at the border, you should be fired today. Like, he should have resigned in disgrace at this hearing. And think about the numbers that Senator Kennedy's talking about. Like, we need to know how many of these are from China, how many are from Venezuela. Right now, it's very relevant how many people are from areas like Palestine or the Middle East. We have huge concerns personally that something bad could happen, because there are people who are very polarized about the people, what's going on in Israel. And I think it just scares me as an American so you can't even tell me how many people are in there that are from some of these countries. But Todd hit the nail on the head. That guy's lying to us. We are paying his salary and he is lying to us. And it is absolutely ridiculous.
Because he knows what that information means. He knows he's a failure. And all the more reason, Jason, like you said, to resign here. We got one more video that's queued up. If we just want to, here's another Mayorkas clip. If you're not mad enough already about this loser, we're going to go over to a
The
really
hearing today, and you don't have those numbers? You are the head of DHS, and you came to this hearing today without those numbers.
That is correct, and I'd be pleased to provide you with that data. We certainly have it at our disposal.
We've asked for them before, and we haven't got them, so we'll be looking forward to getting them. Do you think that millions of people crossing our border illegally creates the risk of a terrorist attack in our country? Secretary Mayorkas, how many people have entered the country illegally across our southern border since the Biden administration took office? A number.
Senator, it's over 6 million.
All right, we'll give it a pause there. That goes on there. This is a great video. If you want to check out our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter, we've got this up there. This is classic Mayorkas evading. But Jason, I love the question about the possible terrorist attack.
Well, yeah, and it's funny for those who don't watch C-SPAN. Todd, how many times in just the last 12 months has Mayorkas been in front of Congress?
Well, he's been in front of several House committees. This is when he's in front of a Senate committee. He keeps going up to Capitol Hill and getting in front of them. But Jason, I think I know what you're going to ask. How often have we heard about that?
I was going to say a few points to understand, folks. We have not heard, Todd and I have, because we spend too much time on C-SPAN. But he's been up there like half a dozen or a dozen times. Every time he's asked the same questions. Every time he never has an answer. This was from a recent hearing, and this is like the 15th time he's been asked these basic questions, and he shows up unprepared. If you wonder if Republicans want to solve the problem, Republicans control the House, and they could do something about it. They keep letting this clown get up there. They keep letting him say, oh, I don't know the numbers. I mean, in any other workplace, if you showed up for a meeting with your bosses completely unprepared, by the second time, they'd be like, dude, you show up here unprepared without answers to these questions. Like this will be the last time you will no longer be having your job. And that's why we get so concerned about Republicans not fighting back.
Yeah, and Jason, I don't know if you've seen these clips too, but they always want to go the Holman rule route. They always say, I propose a $1 salary reduction for so-and-so in Biden's cabinet. Like, not enough. Just get rid of the guy. This guy, he needs to be impeached.
And here's the point, too. You cut his salary to $1, which that made the news. Oh, they cut it. That's not going to take effect because the Senate's not going to sign off on that budget amendment. So Republicans do this great thing like, oh, I passed that. And then they send you a fundraising text and a fundraising email. And we cut Mayorkas' thing to $1. And they go on Twitter and say it. But it didn't do anything. It didn't do anything. You could impeach him. Now, full disclosure, the impeachment isn't going to stick. They aren't going to kick him out of office. But you're going to force him to bring all those numbers that we're talking about. And then he won't be able to say, well, I don't know. All right. As we button this up, Todd, where does
tinfoil hat time? I think we should end on tinfoil hat. Here we go.
All right.
So much nonsense.
Giddy up. This is the speculation part. We've given you the numbers. We've given you the facts. We've showed you the data. We've even had fact-checking people, in the comments. And so far, like what we've said, sourced with government websites. Here's the concern that I have as an American. You've got millions of illegals that have come into this country. And since October 7th, a number of those people that are coming from countries that hate us, that concerns me. I don't think anybody watching this show would be surprised if they hear that something really bad happened. It's not being covered on major news. Last weekend, 7 major cities in America had hundreds of thousands of people protesting pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, and they do not like that we support Israel. And in front of the White House, they estimated the crowd at 300,000 people. You should find that on your regular news programs. But I tweeted about it. By the way, follow me at JRob from MN on Twitter. But I tweeted about it last Sunday morning. I'm like, holy cow, after all these protests Saturday, it should be on every website. I went on all the major news sites, not a single article about it. There was 300,000 people. They were protesting in front of the White House. They were shaking the gates. And they're like, oh, yeah, not even a peep on the news. The other thing that this extrapolates into is voting citizen and end game. And you have to understand, for as much as we like to think Democrats are stupid, they're actually evil and they take the long game. And if I look in Minnesota, for example, and we can talk about New York as well. New York's actually letting illegals vote in local elections. Like, that's a fact. So if you're living in New York and you're not understanding that they're going to try to find a way to let illegals vote in federal elections, you're smoking crack. In Minnesota, though, they've started a process where if you're an illegal, you can get a license now. The other non-connected legislation is when you get your license, they register you to vote. So now legally, you can't vote because you're not a citizen, but you've got a license and they can register you to vote. It is, excuse me, it is a very, very small step for them to just flip the switch and all of a sudden they're voting in our elections.
Yeah, it's pretty bonkers, Jason. And don't forget, in DC a couple of weeks ago, they actually stormed the U.S. Capitol building too. Again, very little coverage. So we had the massive protest in front of the White House this past weekend. A couple of weeks ago, we had the massive protest in the U.S. Capitol. Not a peep. But just imagine, Jason, if another side of politics decided that they wanted to voice their feelings and thoughts about leadership in Washington, D.C., and they tried to do that. Actually, we know how that happens. We've seen that play out.
We've seen that play out.
Right?
Well, and actually, one last shout out to Carrie over on YouTube. MTG's working on impeaching Mayorkas. Here's what I'm going to tell you, folks. Okay, and this is how to understand the Republican game. So let's talk about Biden impeachment. Kevin McCarthy was confirmed as Speaker of the House January 6th. We are now 9 months into this, into them having control of the House. Actually, we're 9 months when we kicked Kevin McCarthy out. We're up to 11 months in. They just this week subpoenaed Hunter Biden. Let that sink in. So you've gotten 25 texts and emails about fundraising about impeachment. People have been saying impeachment. They keep posting on social media. The impeachment of Mayorkas, and MTG is doing the right thing, pushing for that. But the establishment Republican machine is not moving on it. This Mayorkas impeachment, this should have happened months ago. It's going to continue to get drawn out and drawn out and drawn out. My opinion, they'll never take action on it, and it's absolutely ridiculous. So with that, Todd, we're a little over our hour. So folks, sorry we ran a little long. Great conversation in the chat box today.
Love it.
Awesome engagement. Hopefully you learned some stuff, and hopefully there's some facts. And like I say, if you want to support our work, if you like what we do, and you're like, these clowns from Minnesota with tinfoil hats, like, I kind of like these guys. And you know what? Our goal is that when you leave our podcast, you're a little smarter than you showed up. You know something you might not have known before. If you like our work, here's what I'm going to tell you. Easiest thing you can do, everybody watching this show, make sure you hit the share button. Share button is the most powerful button on social media. It helps you spread it. And I'll encourage you to share it with somebody you don't agree with. If you do want to support our work, go to www.theamericantribune.news. That's where we do our deep dives. We do have a subscription available. If you like our work, you can sign up and subscribe to help support what Todd and I do. It's not free for Todd to go to Phoenix. And
Jason, don't send me to the Middle East next week. I love being on location here, but I got my limits too.
I was gonna say, yeah, next week Todd will be on location in the Gaza Strip. He'll be we'll all pray for Todd. But folks, thanks for tuning in. I'm going to turn over to my partner, Todd, to close us out and get us out of here.
Yeah, it was another great show. Thanks for joining us today. The chat box was blowing up. Again, we always ask for let us know what you want us to talk about here. Jason and I love doing some deep dives here. Jason, I feel like we just scratched the surface on immigration. There's so much more we could cover, but we hit our hour here. But if you want to hear more immigration or anything else you want us to take a look at, the bloated deep state, let us know in the comments and we'll take a look. Otherwise, we're back next Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody.
See you next Friday.